am here today with Sandy, and we're going to talk all about IEP tips. I know Sandy will introduce herself, but she has lots of years of experience supporting schools, living in the process of special education. And so she's like, I really want to bring it to the table to talk more about training tips for your team, the staff that you work with. Yes, as the professional of a special education teacher, you are the person who brings a lot to the table, but like, what does that actually mean and look like when we bring it to our staff? Because they are also responsible for the IEP as well. So without further ado, I'm going to let Sandy introduce herself. She is a friend of mine. We've known each other for a couple of years now and met through Master IEP Coach with Catherine Witcher. I'll leave the link there if you want to check it out. But go ahead, Sandy, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, Heather. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on here because ever since you and I met through Master IP Coach, I've been following you like on the socials and stuff. And I absolutely love your outreach and what you do. But the way that we met and the fact that you're the educator still in the classroom is just has really spoken to my heart. And my foray into this world began as mom first. My
Mm,
son, Will, who is now 25 years old, is autistic. And when he was 6 years old, we just like embarked in that whole, this magical document that's out there that's this called an IEP. And
mhm,
it's supposed to like solve everything. It's supposed to like help him and solve everything. And so we embark on the eligibility process. And at that eligibility meeting, I was told he wasn't messed up enough to qualify as a student with an autism spectrum disorder. And you and I've talked about this before. And every time I say that, I love to see the look on people's faces like, what? And I'm grateful that my husband was sitting next to me because it kept me from flying across the table.
mhm,
But it was that realization that what the staffing specialist meant to say was he happened to not meet the eligibility criteria for
mhm,
ASD. He
mhm,
ended up meeting it for other health impairment, but that was such an eye-opening experience for me of I do not know what I don't know about this process and I'm not comfortable. And over the years, I ended up working as a paraprofessional, and then I was the school librarian. And because I'm fully bilingual, they'd bring me in to translate for the Spanish speaking families at the meeting.
mhm,
And I thought this was my aha moment of this is where I want to be. I want to be on the family side of it.
mhm.
So for the past 8 years now, I've been an advocate and a master IP coach, and I love working collaboratively. And I like to tell people like, I'm not the angry advocate.
Mhm.
I like coming to the table from to support the parents and the clients, but I also get the school side
Yeah.
of it too.
Yeah, and I do want to touch on a couple points that you said because I feel like maybe like 10, 15 years ago when your son was starting this process, there was a lot of boxes that they
Oh,
fit students in because that was the box of the
yep,
classroom that they had. So it
yep,
was a self-contained or it was nothing, right? Like you
right,
had maybe some of those opportunities for inclusion, but not really back then.
right.
So, yes, the eligibility wasn't there, but also we didn't have a place for him. I can see probably being part of that process.
Right.
Uh,
And he was always in the gen ed setting, but it was the all or nothing. There
yeah.
was no variations in there of okay, he could be in gen ed, but then let's do a little bit of pull out. It was no either self-contained or all gen ed. Yep.
Yep. Yep. So that box there. And then the other box that you're talking about is that angry advocate. Every time somebody hears that word advocate, they're like, they're so angry and they just want to fight at the table. And honestly, I've met so many great advocates, whatever you want to call them, right? People who are
Right.
supporting at the IEP table, whether it's a like understanding of the process or like trying to take advantage of the families. Like, there are people that are just doing good out there. So I do want you to think about if you are like, oh, advocate, I'm turning this video off. Don't, because I promise
Stick
Sandy is the
around.
nicest person you've ever met.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit more about the school staff side of things, right? We have lots of paraprofessionals, maybe related service members.
Mhm.
Um, some of them have a lot of special experience and some of them don't. So what should we be training on, right? Maybe I'm a new special education teacher. Tell me, like, what am I supposed to be training my staff on? And like, what is not as important?
So one of the first key things, which it seems like a no-brainer, but it gets so overlooked, is the training of the support staff,
Mm-hmm.
the paraprofessionals, the instructional aides,
Mm-hmm.
the collaboration with the related service providers, even the school librarian, or even the cafeteria staff. Like when you have a high need student or a student that has a specific behavior plan,
Mhm.
or even the student that just has the 504 accommodations. As a para, I cannot tell you how mortified I was after the fact when I was given a class to go into as a substitute for the whole class.
Mhm.
And I was never given information on the couple of students in there that had an IEP or had 504 plans.
Mhm.
And I remember that the school that I worked at, we had like a school-wide behavior system, and it was accumulating points as debit or credit. And here I am handing out debits to this child that I'm reprimanding for. He kept standing up, getting out of his seat, squirming around, speaking out of turn, things like that. And little did I know that he had an IEP. He had specific goals that they were working on, but they also he had all these accommodations on there that I was never told about. The way that I felt after the fact when I realized that here I was contributing to, taking digs at this student's self-esteem
Mhm.
by reprimanding him for things that were out of his control, or that he needed to be taught by the staff how to rein it in. And at the end
Mhm.
of the day, yes, a lot of it is overseen by the special education teacher, but anyone that works with that student is responsible for offering those accommodations, offering those supports in
Mhm.
the classroom setting and anywhere on campus too.
Mhm. Yeah, and sometimes you don't even think about the bus driver, but cluing the
Yes,
bus driver in on those types of things too. Like loud music is alarming for this student, so don't play
yes,
music on the bus or can't sing the happy birthday song when it's somebody's birthday. Things like that isn't so important to know, especially when those triggers come into place.
yes, yes. And then the other side of that is, thinking of it from the perspective with the lens of when I was the school librarian. I was given the class that came in and they were going to go ahead and check out their books. I had no idea who had accommodations, who didn't. By then, I knew that I should be asking these questions, and I
Mhm.
was.
Mhm.
But there's also the side of it of we've got students that are 2 and 3 years below grade level.
Mhm.
And the teachers are really struggling to try and help them bridge that gap. So they've got a specific um, a Lexile level or whatever the school is using
Mhm.
to have them check out these books at their reading level. And I was told, no, 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 they're only supposed to check out books at their reading level. And letting a child's imagination take flight when, okay, yes, let's offer him that support of the books and the resources he's going to need at his level. But let's let his imagination run wild. What if he likes dinosaurs and he sees this, book that is about dinosaurs and it's
Mhm.
a couple of years above his grade level? Let him still explore through that. And
Mhm.
also, let's not call him out and embarrass him in front of all of his peers
Mhm.
when he's checking out a book that's 2 grade levels below everybody else that's in the class.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a big thing, just even to let a student explore and be curious and have choice in things. I
Yes.
know body autonomy is really important right now, and like, what does my body want? Like, what does my brain want? What do
Yeah,
I want? So I see that totally in books of like, okay, well, I'm gonna read something that might be about a fictional character. Like, is that against me? No, it shouldn't be. Um, and of course, those special interests too come into play
yeah,
as well. And we want our students to explore their
yeah,
own special interests too. So I
yeah,
hear lots of different things here.
and to me, like I said, anybody that works with the student
Hmm.
should be trained
Yeah,
and should
for
receive
sure.
training about the IEPs, absolutely.
For sure. All right. So I can't take the time to sit down with every single person in the building and go through every
Right,
single piece of the IEP, right? I can't like give a professional development on all of my students and all of their IEPs, right? And blast it to everybody. So
right.
what specific sections do you feel like might be the most important to at least start with initially when you like maybe it's a new paraprofessional coming in, maybe it's a new related service person coming in. What is one section that I really need to like make sure to hit on?
Aside from the accommodations, because that kind of, like I said before, it seems like it's self-explanatory. I love the parent input statements,
Mhm.
in the present level sections of the IEPs,
Mhm.
because if you, as the staffing specialist or the teacher, or what have you, is encouraging the parent to provide that written input, making sure that that staff is reading
Mhm.
a well-written parent input statement, or at least even just the high points of what is it that this parent is really concerned about for
Mhm.
their child. What is it that they want their hopes and dreams are, not long term, but how about
Mhm,
just for this year? I want my child to establish meaningful friendships. I
mhm,
want my child to be able to walk safely in the community. I want my
mhm,
child to be able to access the water fountain and use it effectively. I want to make sure that my child is self-advocating. What is it that is important to the parents that gives you that little window into what's going on in that student's life,
mhm.
and how can you relate it to what you all are providing for his experience in the school setting?
Yeah, for sure. I agree. And there's so many times that I've read through IEPs and that part is missed. Even if it
Yeah.
was a hard parent for me to get a hold of,
Right.
those little connections when I did have those
Yep.
moments to make that connection with the families to get them to be like, hey, can you answer a
Yep.
couple questions about your child? I feel like those moments I even harnessed, even if it was the first initial call that I made in the school year. Like I wrote that
Yep.
all down. Like
Right.
what can I expect about meeting your child, or what goals do you have? What thoughts are in your head right now? What concerns do you have? And those things is what I would accumulate into the IEP when the time
Yep.
came, right? Even though I had that conversation back in August, that still might be as important, if not more important, now that we are 6, 8 months down the road, getting towards the end of
Exactly.
the school year, right? Now it's in an IEP for at least the following year. Because I think that's another big piece is like sometimes the parents aren't as active as we want them to be.
Yeah.
So those small touch points to make sure that input statement is there is
Hmm.
so critical to make sure that that student is on track to reach any of their post-secondary outcomes.
Agreed. And if in fact there is no parent input statement and the teacher has just not been able to establish that rapport and get that input from the parent, then make sure that the educator has written their present level statements well and elaborated on what the needs of that student are, and make sure that that gets, you know, disseminated to everyone that's working with them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I know sometimes teachers are really struggling to find any time to get the training that they need for their staff. I know I
Yeah.
always would use like those small windows of time, maybe where an OT or a speech is leading a group and I can pull a paraprofessional or two to be like, hey, can I run through this behavior plan with you? Because behavior plans were
Yes.
always like super
Oh
important to
my
make sure
gosh.
like
Yeah.
you are following this and taking data on.
Yep.
But like then that like 5, 10 minutes before or after school too, right? Like, hey, let's
Mhm.
run through this IEP goal so you know what to look for. Or can I remind you of the student's present
Yep.
levels? Those types of things.
Yep.
Do you have any suggestions for that time crunch of like, I can't sit down and run through the whole IEP?
Right. One thing to save time, and it's a lot about the individual educator and what their model is, and what speaks to them and how they work.
Mhm,
Your prep time.
mhm,
It's the time that you can spend in prepping
mhm,
before, whether it's during your planning period or even, in the evenings. And I hate that thought because it happens sadly so often. Just the other
mhm,
night, a staffing specialist sent me an email at 10:45 at night. And that just broke my heart that this person is up at that hour when they
mhm,
should be either already in bed or at home with family
mhm,
sending this. But one thing that I think saves time for the educators that are responsible for the IEP and that meeting, pulling everyone from the classroom to participate in that meeting,
mhm,
sending the proposed draft in advance.
mhm,
Because that way the parent, and hear me out, guys, whoever's listening to this. I know that we get, occasionally I'll get staff members that say, nope, we don't send out a draft in advance. No, we're not allowed to send out a draft because then that's considered predetermination. Everybody knows that it's not predetermination, because you do have staffing meetings that happen before,
mhm,
and
mhm,
the ultimate decisions are made at the table by everyone. But when everyone that's going to participate in that meeting has had a chance to see that document in advance, that can save so much time at
mhm,
that IEP meeting. Because I always, when I'm working with families, I make sure that we get that proposed draft so that they can take a look at it. They can highlight for me all the acronyms or things that they have questions about or things that they're not understanding,
mhm,
so that I can try and explain it to them in advance. They can look things up in advance if they're not working with an advocate, so that when they come to the table, they've already got a clearly defined list of these are the questions I have, you
Mhm.
can cut down what may turn into a 2-hour meeting into half that time.
For sure.
If everyone can see where everybody's head is at in advance.
Yeah. I know, it's such a great tip. I know some schools are super against those drafts, but I feel like it is really helpful to give everybody like a heads up. Right?
Yeah.
It's not predetermination, but like, hey,
Nope.
heads up, this is where our thought process is going. Is this
Exactly.
something we all agree with? Because it really is helpful. I know there's been times too that I even would say, like, hey, paraprofessional
Yep.
in my classroom, is this seem like an accurate picture for what the student can do? Is this really what a goal that we should be working towards to get towards. So,
Right.
I think that draft is such a great concept.
Yeah.
So, do you suggest creating some type of visual or some type of cheat sheet for staff so that, again, once that IEP is completed and you now have to go train the staff in your room or supporting
Yep.
that student or students, um, is there a like a format that you like to use or something that can really make it more a quick cheat sheet type
Right.
of document?
Well, and this is where I have to, full disclosure, I'm not an educator in the classroom, so I don't know what makes sense for everyone
Yeah.
and what their particular teaching style is. But I know that I've seen tons of on TPT stores like yours and things like that, where they've got the IEP one sheets, or in particular, things that where I do work with or see them a lot is the behavior plans,
Mhm.
safety plans, if there is a healthcare plan, like just
Yep.
those little cheat sheets with bullet points of what are the important factors that they need to look out for. But
Mhm.
I'm going to challenge everyone. Here's one that you may not think of. How about an accommodations cheat sheet for the student?
Mhm.
I cannot tell you how often students do not know what accommodations they have and what accommodations they're entitled to so
Mhm.
that they can ask for them.
Mhm.
And by the teacher letting them know and having that conversation with them, and just, a quick little snapshot of, hey, by the way, just as a reminder, here's a little laminated card, or even just here's a photocopy. These are the accommodations you have. Let me know. That can also help establish that rapport and break down that barrier a little bit
Mhm.
with that student that may be hesitant to ask for their accommodations. And
Yep.
then you get to that IEP meeting later on, and the parent starts asking about, well, how often did he use his extra time accommodations? Oh, he didn't ask for it because he didn't realize he had that.
Mhm. Yeah, communication is key, and the more communication you can provide, whether it's on a piece of paper or verbally or whatever,
Yep.
or if that teacher is aware, like, "Hey, John, would you like to use your accommodation today of extended time? Would you like to use
Right.
your accommodation of finding a different area to work?"
Yep.
Right, and providing that information for them, I
Exactly.
think is so helpful. We call them student snapshots,
Mhm.
that have like their likes, their dislikes, their
Right.
triggers,
Yes.
anything that's really helpful for them and like in crisis situations or pre-crisis, and anything that is good for them after the fact of like how to get them back into a schedule.
Yeah.
So I feel like something like that is super helpful as well.
And one thing that I have seen, and I happen to have a client that she took the first year that a teacher gave her one of these, and she's run with it every year since. A teacher gave like those little welcome sheets
Mhm.
that the teachers create in the younger grades. They sent it home to the parent of the
Mhm.
student with the IEP, and she called it, in this particular case, it was her Evan 101. And
Mhm.
so every year she provides that to the teachers,
Yep.
but for teachers, especially the elementary grades, and you've got these IEP students, send that home to the parents, not as the fun get to know you activity that the whole class is going to engage in, but
Mhm.
just make it more tailored to what their IEP needs are,
Mhm.
and ask for that parent feedback.
Yep. I've had a couple parents that I have worked with that have sent like a whole like document or like a video story or slide
Oh, I
deck
like
or
that.
something about a
Yeah,
student. And it's like, yeah, Izzy 101, right? Trying to get to
right.
know what is working for that student and what isn't
Yep,
working, what the goals are.
right.
And I appreciate those oh so much because I feel like I reference them a lot when I was looking at goals or future planning,
Yeah,
because I want to make sure that the parent input and family input is there too.
yeah,
For sure.
that's great.
Do you have any other tips and tricks, for training staff on that IEP?
I do. So this one gets overlooked a lot, and it is when I get asked in different types of trainings what my favorite section of the IEP is, if it's not the parent input statement, it is towards the very bottom of the document, support for school personnel.
Mhm.
I can't tell you how often that gets overlooked or it just gets glossed over. And I'll refer back to it and I'll say, well, the student has speech services. So can we put in their collaboration between the special education teacher, the gen ed teacher, and the speech pathologist? We talk all the time anyway. Okay, but how about for your time management and for your staffing and
Mhm.
for your hours at work? How about if we actually document it on the IEP? But all the other types of trainings that I advocate for so strongly for my clients that also will benefit the teacher. So
Mhm.
whether it is training on an AAC device that the
Mhm.
teacher can then receive training. The other day I had a student that had a very significant behavior plan and FBA that we had come up with, and the teacher was, bless her heart, she was only a second year teacher, and she was trying to be kind and say how she was getting hurt because he was being aggressive in the classroom. And I said, okay, have you had CPT training, the compression? No, I haven't, but I could really bet. Okay, can we please add that in here? Well,
Mhm.
all the teachers are going to be getting training on that. Okay, great. Can we please add that in here for Miss Jones? Because I really want to make sure that
Mhm.
within the next month, Miss Jones will have this training.
Mhm.
I also love bringing in resources from the district that teachers don't use enough.
Mhm.
So if you do have the student with the behavior plan, call in the district behavior specialist.
Mhm.
Or even if the student has a personal ABA therapist, but bringing in somebody like a district behavior specialist, here's this behavior plan that our staff came up with. Tell me how to implement this in the classroom. What
Mhm.
does this actually look like?
Yeah.
And write that in for yourselves. Give yourselves that gift.
Yes, for sure. I know there was lots of times that like it would be physical therapist training or speech pathologist training
Right.
on AAC and always in there. And then I feel like there was one a couple years ago that it was like autism training. And then I was like, I never got an autism training. And I kept asking about it. And they're like, oh yeah, like it's in your like training week that you did when you got hired. And I was like, yeah, like
It
3 years
was.
ago. What are you
Yeah, right.
doing? Like things
Exactly.
change. I need updated information.
That's it.
Um, I know we've shared a lot of pieces of information here, but do you have any other resources or things that if teachers are trying to look for some more information and direction to go to learn more about IEPs?
So aside from like the traditional, like the rights law books, which those
Hmm.
honestly, they're really quite good. I had them in my library just from a personal perspective.
Hmm.
And she's a mutual friend of ours, Shelley Kino, who was an educator in the classroom for many years, and now she's just pretty much focusing on the advocacy part. She wrote a great book called Those Who Can't Teach.
Hmm.
And it's all snippets of stories of her experience as a special education teacher
Yeah.
and that intersection with the relationships with the parents and the relationships with the student themselves. And
Yeah.
it's just it's a very well written book. I really love that book. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that book changed the way that I was a teacher and how I
Oh,
interacted with families and the grace that I would continue to give them, knowing the struggles that they might have gone through.
yeah.
So if you're really looking to get some like definitely genuine caring thoughts for families, like this
Yes.
book is the feel good book that's just gonna like make you be a better educator.
Yes. And I haven't received it yet, but I just ordered, another mutual friend of ours wrote the intentional IEP, Stephanie DeLucia. I cannot wait to get my hands on that one. So I can't quite recommend it yet, but I have a strong feeling that it's going to be a winner
Yeah,
because it
for
was
sure.
fantastic. Yeah.
I know. I'm so
Yeah.
excited
So I
to
can't
dive
wait.
into that.
Yeah.
And I will make sure to leave links for all of those books below on rights law, the intentional IEP, and those who can't teach. So if you want to check those out and get those for yourself as well, we will do that. Of course, I will leave all of Sandy's links below so you can contact her if you want to talk more advocacy things or IEP processes. But thank you so much for being here, Sandy. This was so helpful.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me, Heather.
Of course.